On our daughter's graduation day, my husband surprised everyone by telling me he was leaving me. But when I revealed his secret addiction to the audience, he started screaming uncontrollably. If you've ever faced hidden struggles in your family, listen to my story until the end. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. My name is Laura Martins. I am 34 years old, and for a long time, I was that woman everyone thought had the perfect life. A devoted mother, faithful wife, and administrative assistant. I always tried hard to maintain the appearance of an ideal family. I woke up early, organized the house, took care of our daughter, and still did my best at work. It seemed like everything was under control, but inside me there was a silent storm that I didn't know how to face. For 12 years, I trusted my husband, thinking I knew him every inch of the way. But deep down, I always felt an emptiness, a restlessness that I couldn't explain. He would change his mood, disappear for hours without giving an explanation, and I harbored doubts that I never had the courage to share for fear of judgment, scandals, and most of all, of losing the family I loved so much. I asked myself, am I the one who was wrong? Am I exaggerating? Maybe I'm just tired. These doubts consumed me and left me increasingly alone in the crowd. I felt my heart ache as he looked away, and I remained silent to avoid arguments. The shame of facing the truth paralyzed me. My friends talked about their happy marriages, about the little imperfections that could be overcome, and I felt like the only one carrying this dark secret. His hidden lust, the addiction, I suspected, was like an invisible monster slowly eating away at our relationship. Every hidden message, every averted glance, was a silent stab that I suffered every day. I lived in a cycle of denial and fear, not knowing if the man I loved was really the man by my side. For years, I thought I could fix everything on my own, that if I was more patient, more understanding, he would change. But the truth that I hid even from myself was that I was drowning in silence. And this pain was destroying not only my marriage, but also my soul. And that day, the day of our daughter's graduation, when my world collapsed in front of everyone, I finally made the decision to step out of the shadow of silence. It wasn't easy. It wasn't an act of revenge, but of survival. I needed to show myself and him that the secret he had tried so hard to hide could no longer hold me back. My story is not unique. I know that. And perhaps you out there on the other side are also feeling a similar fear, a weight that seems impossible to carry. I'm here to tell you that we don't have to face this alone, that there is enormous strength in facing the truth, even when it hurts. This is my story, and I hope it can touch your heart and bring some light to your own struggle. The day of our daughter's graduation was supposed to be one of the happiest days of our lives, a moment to celebrate her achievements, a milestone for our family. But in the middle of the ceremony, everything shattered. My husband, Marcos, stood up and announced in front of everyone that he was leaving me. His words hit like a bombshell, sending shockwaves through the room. I could see the disbelief. In my daughter's eyes, the stunned silence from relatives and the whispered questions that spread like wildfire. For years, I had been carrying a heavy burden, a secret that had been eating me alive. Marcos had a hidden addiction, a dark side he never dared to show anyone, especially me. He was trapped in a compulsive cycle of pornography and sexual urges, a taboo he buried deep inside, hiding behind a mask of normalcy and charm. I had felt the tension, the distance growing between us, the late nights when he locked himself away with his phone, the unexplained guilt that clouded our conversations, but I was afraid to confront the truth, afraid to break the fragile image of the family we had built. That day, watching him announce his departure so coldly, I realized I couldn't stay silent anymore. I made a choice to expose the truth, to bring light to the darkness he had hidden for so long. When I revealed his secret addiction to everyone in the room, the reaction was explosive. Marcos lost control, screaming and denying everything with a ferocity that stunned us all. The shame, the anger, the confusion, it all poured out in a storm of emotions that no one was prepared for. I saw the man I once loved unravel before my eyes, but I also saw the power of truth breaking through years of lies and silence. It was a moment of chaos, yes, but also a moment of reckoning. That day, in front of our family and friends, the fragile walls of secrecy came crashing down, and though it hurt, it was the first step toward freedom for me, for Marcos, and for our daughter who deserved to know the truth. Maybe you've been hiding a secret pain, a silent struggle that feels impossible to face. Know that you're not alone. Sometimes it takes one moment of courage to change everything, and that day I found mine. The first signs were so subtle, I almost missed them. Whispers of a secret life hiding behind closed doors. I remember those nights when Marcos would retreat into the silence of his phone, eyes glued to a screen I was never allowed to see. At first it seemed harmless, a little escape after a long day, But gradually, those stolen hours multiplied, swallowing whole evenings, then entire weekends. He became distant, the warmth in his eyes fading, replaced by a guardedness that pushed me away. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, that he needed space, but deep down I knew something was wrong. Our conversations grew shorter, the laughter that once filled our home replaced by a heavy, suffocating tension. I tried to reach out to break through the walls he was building, but every attempt ended in silence or anger. We went to therapy, together, or at least I thought we did. Marcos started the sessions but dropped out after a few weeks, leaving me to face the pain alone. I begged him to fight with me, to fight for our family. But his addiction was stronger than his promises. Our daughter, so young and bright, began to sense the cracks in our family foundation. I caught her lingering looks, the way she would press, her lips tightly together, trying to hold back questions she was too afraid to ask. I saw the confusion in her eyes, the weight of a child's worry when the adults around her can't find peace. On the eve of her graduation, I stood at a crossroads. I knew the truth had to come out, not just for me, but for all of us. It was time to strip away the masks and face the raw, painful reality. The day arrived, and with it, a suffocating tension that hung heavy in the air. Guests whispered behind hands, casting judgmental glances. Family members sat rigid, their silence louder than any words. My heart pounded as I stepped onto the stage, the microphone cold in my hand. For a moment, I hesitated, the weight of years of silence pressing down on me. But then I spoke. I told them about Marcus's hidden struggle, the addiction he fought and often lost to, the secret battles that nearly destroyed us. I shared the pain, the betrayals, the nights spent in tears, and the desperate hope for healing. The room held its breath, the world seeming to tilt on its axis, and then Marcos erupted a storm of screams, accusations flying like sharp knives, a moment of raw, unfiltered rage that left everyone stunned. I watched the man I once loved unravel before me, a victim of his own demons as much as I was. It was chaos, heartbreak, and a brutal truth laid bare for all to see. But beneath the devastation, something shifted, a crack in the facade that, for the first time, allowed light to peek through. Maybe you've lived this silence too, the invisible war inside a marriage, the helplessness when love is shadowed by secrets. This story is for you, because sometimes the hardest battles are fought in the quiet, and the bravest act is breaking the silence. In that moment, as Marcus's scream shattered the silence of the hall, everything inside me broke. Too, but not in the way I expected. His voice wasn't just filled with rage, it was trembling with something deeper, something raw and naked. Fear, despair, a silent plea for help that none of us had ever heard before. For years, I had seen his cold detachment, his distant stares, his late nights lost in the glow of a screen, thinking he was indifferent, uncaring, even cruel. But standing there, surrounded by friends, family, and strangers, his scream revealed the truth. Neither of us had dared admit he was broken. And terrified, I froze. My hands clutched the microphone so tightly my knuckles went white, but my heart softened in a way I never expected. I didn't see my enemy anymore. I saw my husband, the man I married, the man I built a family with, drowning in a sea of shame, unable to find the surface. His addiction wasn't just a betrayal against me, it was a prison for him. The room fell into a suffocating silence after his outburst, the sound of his screams still echoing off the walls. People looked away, uncomfortable, pretending they hadn't seen a man unravel in front of them. But I saw everything. I saw the child he once was, wounded in ways I might never fully understand. I saw the man trying to cover his pain with secrecy, with control, with the hollow comfort of fleeting pleasures. I saw someone who wanted to be saved, but didn't know how to ask. And in that moment, all my anger, all my resentment, all those years of feeling unloved and unseen, they didn't disappear, but they shifted. They made room for something else, compassion. Not because he deserved it, not because what he did didn't hurt, but because finally I realized that this truth, this ugly, messy, painful truth, was the only way forward. For years we had been trapped in a cycle of silence, shame, and pretense, smiling in public, falling apart in private. But now everything was exposed, raw and undeniable. There was no going back, and as much as it terrified me, it also liberated me. Marcos stood there, gasping, chest heaving, his face flushed with humiliation and rage. But behind his eyes, I saw it, the small flickering light of someone who, deep down, still wanted to fight. Not against me, but for us, for himself. For our daughter, I stepped closer to him, not out of duty, but out of understanding. This wasn't about punishing him or shaming him further. It was about breaking the chains that had held us both captive for so long. I realized that exposing his addiction wasn't an act of revenge, it was an act of love. a desperate last chance, attempt to force us all to face what we'd been too afraid to confront. Maybe you know what that's like. Maybe you've loved someone who's lost inside their own darkness, someone who pushes you away because they don't know how to ask you to stay. Maybe you've felt the ache of wanting to scream for them, to force them to see how much they're hurting you, and themselves. That day on that stage, I realized that love isn't always soft and gentle. Sometimes love is fierce. Sometimes it's standing in front of a crowd and ripping the curtain away from the lies, even if it means risking everything. Because only then can healing even begin. I looked at Marcos, this man I loved, this man who had betrayed me, this man who was now more vulnerable than I had ever seen him, and I understood. We could either let this moment destroy us completely, or use it to rebuild, brick by brick, with honesty this time. The gasp of the crowd faded into the background as our eyes locked. For the first time in years, we truly saw each other. Not the roles we played, husband, wife, mother, father, but the wounded humans behind those masks. And I knew then, this wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of a different chapter. One neither of us had ever imagined. But maybe, just maybe, the one we both desperately needed. And as I stood there, in front of everyone, with my heart pounding and my voice steady, I realized something else. Sometimes, the most courageous thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it shatters the world you thought you knew. Because from those shattered pieces, something new can grow. Maybe you're holding on to a secret right now, thinking it will protect your family, your relationship, your image. But ask yourself, is that silence saving you or slowly killing you? For me, speaking the truth was the most terrifying thing I've ever done. But it was also the bravest, and in that moment, seeing Marcus's tear-filled eyes, I knew we might just find our way out of the darkness together. After that day, nothing was the same, but in the best way possible. Our marriage entered a period of deep crisis there. Was no denying that. The trust we once had felt fractured beyond repair, but for the first time in years, we weren't pretending anymore. There were no more lies, no more late nights wondering, no more silent dinners filled with invisible walls. Everything was out in the open, and that in itself was a strange kind of relief. Marcos agreed to go to therapy, real therapy. This time, not the half-hearted sessions he used to walk out of when things got uncomfortable. And I went to together. We faced the hard conversations, the raw confessions, the shame that had built up over more than a decade. And most importantly, we brought our daughter into those conversations, carefully, gently, helping her understand that even when families break, they can also heal. It wasn't easy. There were days I thought about walking away, days when his old habits tried to creep back in, and days when I doubted if love could survive something like this. But every time we sat together in that therapist's office, every time we looked our daughter in the eye and told her the truth, a small piece of the broken trust began to mend. The biggest shift, though, was inside me. I felt the weight that had been suffocating me for years finally lift. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't, but because the lie was over. The pretending was over. I wasn't carrying his secret alone anymore, hiding in shame, sacrificing my own sanity for the image of a perfect family. Now we live in truth, messy, complicated, painful truth, but it's real. And for the first time in a long time, that's enough. Looking back now, I realized that the real transformation wasn't just in our marriage, it was inside me. For so many years, I lived as a silent victim, trapped by fear, by shame, by the belief that protecting my husband's secret was somehow protecting my family. I thought that enduring in silence was strength, but it wasn't. It was slow, quiet destruction. That moment on the stage, when I chose truth over fear, was the moment I reclaimed my voice. I became a woman who refused to be defined by someone else's addiction, someone else's shame. I learned that lust and addiction are not moral failures, but wounds deep, complicated wounds that need treatment, not secrecy. More than that, I finally understood that I didn't have to carry the weight alone. For years, I believed it was. My responsibility to keep the family together, to cover the cracks, to smile in public while falling apart inside. But the truth is, no one should bear that kind of burden alone. I found strength not in pretending everything was fine, but in embracing the mess, the brokenness, and seeking help. I forgave myself for all the times I stayed quiet, for all the moments I doubted my own instincts, for all the years I chose silence over confrontation. Now, I know that asking for help is not weakness. It's the greatest act of courage. I no longer live under the shadow of shame. I've learned to embrace my own humanity, my own imperfections, and to stand tall in the face of fear. That's the woman I've become. Not perfect, not fearless, but honest, compassionate, and free and you. How much longer will you keep running from the truth that's been quietly breaking you from the inside? How many more nights will you tell yourself it's not the right time? Or maybe it'll get better on its own, while that silent pain keeps growing deeper, heavier, more unbearable. Repressing what hurts doesn't make it disappear. It only allows the wound to fester. I know that now because I lived it for years. Silence feels safer, but it's a prison. The real freedom begins when you allow yourself to be vulnerable. When you risk being seen fully, even with your flaws and wounds exposed, you don't have to keep carrying that weight alone. The shame, the fear, the loneliness, they're all liars that keep you trapped. The truth, as terrifying as it may seem, is the only thing that can set you free. I promise you, there is strength on the other side of that fear. Here's a simple but powerful step you can take today. Talk to someone you trust. It doesn't have to be a grand public confession. Just one honest conversation. One moment of courage where you stop pretending and start healing. You might be surprised by how much lighter you'll feel, how much stronger you truly are. Remember, healing doesn't happen in hiding. It happens in connection, in truth, in those raw moments when we choose to be brave despite the fear. So I'm asking you now, what's stopping you? How much longer will you carry that silent pain? Take the first step today. Say it out loud. Let someone in. Your healing starts, not when. The pain ends, but when you stop running from it, you are not alone. Your story matters, and you are so much stronger than you think. Here at Confession Stories, we are more than just spectators. We are a family who understands that no one fights their battles alone. This is your safe space, where every story, every struggle, every victory matters. You don't have to hide anymore. Share your story in the comments. Your words could be exactly what someone needs to hear today. Let's help each other heal, grow, and find strength together. Remember, your pain is not your identity. It's just part of your journey. Together, we can transform wounds into wisdom, scars into strength, and silence into solidarity. Join this community of courage and hope. We are here, with open hearts, ready to listen to you. You are not alone. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. Keep watching this video that is appearing on your screen.